For those of you that's been following me a while, remember several months back, I played a clip or two from this music artist. Take a look.
This national defense, pal, our families are under attack from people like you with these lyrics.
John, you don't have to buy them.
Mr. Zappa,
could I make a statement about national defense?
Yeah.
The biggest threat to America today is not communism. It's moving America toward a fascist theocracy. And everything that's happened during the Reagan administration is steering us right down that pipe.
Oh, Mr. Zappa, do you really think? I mean, all kidding aside, in this country, with the permissiveness that we are moving toward a fascist theocracy, anything goes.
We are, but
do you think things like this would have ever been permitted?
Smile again.
When we were 20, when we were kids, you're about my age, maybe
I'm
a little
45.
younger. Well, I'm 55. Do you think when I was a kid that they would permit songs like that to be sold? I mean, permissiveness is the game. I mean,
exactly.
you're not really serious if you're saying we're going toward a fascist theocracy.
That's right, we are.
Wait a minute.
In what way? Give me one example.
Wait. One example of a fascist theocracy.
When you have a government that prefers a certain moral code derived from a certain religion, and that moral code turns into legislation to suit one certain religious point of view, and if that code happens to be very, very right-wing, almost toward Attila the Hun...
Well, then you are an anarchist. Every form of civil government is based on some kind of morality, Frank.
Morality in terms of behavior, not in terms of theology.
Well, of course, but look...
I think this country's turning right.
No, I think that the media is turning right. And I think that many of the people who get into office have gotten in there by wearing a pseudo middle of the road kind of a costume, and then lean toward the right when they find out the right is paying the freight once they get into office. Let our minds drift back to the early days right before Reagan made his big run. There was a deal made between the fundamentalist right and the Republican Party, literally purchasing the platform. If you stick the prayer in school on here, if you stick the abortion on here, money, the land of milk and honey will flow in your direction.
Is that any different than politics of the Democratic Party, in which, all kinds of different interest groups had certain things they wanted to do?
It is very different. It is very different. Because it is so focused, and it is so wealthy, and it is so protected. There's so much money involved, and I think that it has been the ruination of the GOP. GOP now has, as they say...
The grand old party.
That's right. Enterprisers on one side and moralizers on the other. I'm with the enterprisers. Let's get down to business.
You're for Jack Kemp, then, on the one hand, when he talks about entrepreneurial activity and all that?
The line is nice, but I'm not for Jack Kemp. You know what I mean? What I'm saying is that if you are going to be a Republican, you ought to focus on what Republicans are supposed to be good at, which is, let's do business, okay? I mean, business is good for the whole world. People like to do business. But when you start trying to legislate morality, you've got a problem. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked in the past. It won't work in the future.
Yeah, but if anything goes, there's got to be some sense of responsibility, don't you think?
There's a difference between responsibility and adherence to dogma. When the dogma becomes legislation, that's when you have the danger. I have this horrible fear that the United States could wend its way toward being a fascist theocracy. The cross converted into a symbol of fascism in the service of politics. This is bad.
That's the late, great Frank Zappa. And what he was saying rings true today. Isn't that amazing that he can see, as a person that wasn't a believer, what was going on? And the reason for this message is because it's here. It is actually here. I want you to hear from another person that's not a believer, and but I've been saying that how unbelievers, people in the world that don't even know the Lord, are able to see what's happening within the Christendom. Take a listen.
On Sunday, the White House is hosting a giant Christian nationalist rally on the National Mall, and somehow we're all supposed to pretend this is normal. The event is literally called Rededicate 250, and it's supposed to celebrate America's 250th anniversary by rededicating the country to God. Except America was never dedicated to the Christian God in the first place. That's the whole point of the Constitution, which they would know if they ever got around to reading Amendment 1. The Constitution mentions religion twice, and both times it is preceded by the word no. But apparently nobody told the Trump administration this, or they did and they just don't care. This thing is being described by the White House itself as a giant revival. There will be Christian music, public prayer, multiple pastors, and a literal worship service at the end of the day. And I want to be clear, this is not some private church event. This rally is tied to the White House and funded in part with public money. Even military bands from the Air Force, Navy, and Marines are on the schedule. Because nothing says religious freedom like the government hosting a massive event to promote one brand of one religion. You know who's not on the schedule? Muslims, atheists, mainline Protestants. There are no representatives from historically black churches. It is diverse only if your spectrum of diversity runs from far-right Christianity to really far-right Christianity. And let's not ignore the hypocrisy either. The people participating in this event are the same people who constantly claim Christians are the most persecuted people in America. They will use a taxpayer-funded stage backed by the White House and military bands and corporate sponsors and millions in public dollars in order to tell the world how they are all victims. Because none of this is about the country. It's not even about Jesus. It is just a show of power. Look where we are, look where you are, screw you. If the founders could see this now, they would be rolling in their graves. The same people rewriting history in public schools now want to rewrite it on the National Mall too. Because if they can convince people America was founded as a Christian nation, which it was not, then policies based on their version of Christianity, which are anti-women, anti-LGBTQ, anti-brown people, all of that starts looking patriotic.
Yes, this is what's getting ready to happen tomorrow, folks. This is what's happening with this 250th dedication, that they're going to sit there and put these faith leaders, so-called faith leaders together, and guess who's going to be there? Paula White. Oh, the faith office, that Pastor Paula White is going to be there, and guess who else is there? We just talked about him. Robert Jeffress, Franklin Graham. As you see these names of these preachers that are going to be there. Look at that. Look at these names. Some of you are going to know some of the names. You know, I've been speaking out against Franklin Graham and Robert Jeffress for a while now, for the last several years, of how much they know better and how much of a disgrace that they are and how it's time for them to resign. You know, I was thinking back to when the 2020 election happened. Franklin Graham sat there back then when he came forth and said, oh, I tend to believe, Mr. Trump, that the election was stolen. And back then, there was a petition that people wanted him fired from that Samantha's Purse, the organization that's bringing in millions, where that's the part of the problem with these folks, you know, is all about money. And they wanted him fired because they felt like he helped with the turmoil that happened at the Capitol on January the 6th. As he was part of it. Anybody that was part of that, because you had thousands of pastors and leaders that were there at that event that day. And so that's what I've been saying. I was thinking that this morning when I was looking, just going through numbers and thinking about the children of Israel when they were this hard-headed and when the spies went out and Joshua and Caleb and them, the only positive report. And the other spies had this negative that they looked in. The land was promised to them, but they were fearful and no faith and totally forgot about the goodness of God. And because of this, God has had enough. They wandered for 40 years, generations. They didn't get to go into that promised land. And I was thinking, like, that's why I've been saying that there's a generation right now, these leaders that are in particular places right now, it's time. We need new generation. These folks, it's going to take. Unfortunately, the devil has done a lot of damage within the body of Christ. And there's a whole lot of work that needs to be done, but it's going to be damaged. I mean, you talking about for years to come, generations to come. And then we're going to need some of these people to just move on. As I mentioned in the previous video or so, they need to go into exile. Some of these folks, they no longer need to be in leadership positions. Because as I mentioned in the past video, talking about the Robert Jeffersons and all of these desperate pastors to try to push this narrative that America's founded as a Christian nation into everybody's face, and now utilizing the government on a day of false worship is what it is. Because God's not going to hear none of their prayers. They can play all that music all they want. They can parade. They can do all of the things and go out there and think that they're giving glory to him. But they're actually giving glory to the king, the Satan, the one who is the ruler of this kingdom, of this earth. Him, Satan himself. That's why this is not of God. Anybody that is operating and taking part in this, they're outside of God's will, and they're being disobedient. And as I mentioned before, it's time. Bye-bye, Robert Jeffress. It's time for you to step down. Franklin Graham's, any pastor, anybody that's preaching nationalism, anybody that's trying to merge the government with the church, don't associate. You're gonna get out of that place. I've been telling people before, many of you that's new, you may not. I've been warning people that I said in the many messages way back. You're gonna have to leave. You're gonna have to make a tough decision. It's time to leave. If you're still going to particular churches that preach like this, you got to get out of there. You've got to get out of there. And you know why? Because just like the Lord was angry and upset with the children of Israel just being disobedient and this all, you know, how they were just forgetting about the goodness of him, the wrath is going to come. And these people that think they're getting away with playing around with God, utilizing him for money, utilizing him, trying to, hide, masquerading behind the banner of Christianity for money, fame, and power and all of that, the wrath of God is going to come upon them. I'm telling you, you're walking in a dangerous place playing around with this stuff. I mean, these folks have no fear of the Lord, and they think, because we're going to dive more into this nation. We're going to dive into what was going on. We're going to take a time. We're going to do H.G. Wells in another message here, the next message or so. Another message is coming up. We're going to pretend for those H.G. Wells, the time machine. We're going to take a trip back to 1776. We're going to see what was going on really during that time. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to continue to talk about these frauds that are out here masquerading as believers in Christ and doing damage and creating stumbling blocks. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to put them in the spotlight and continue to give God the glory and talk about the issues the church run away from, tackle Satan and his tactics, punch him right in between the chops. Evangelism for God is the channel. My name is Maurice Braxton. Stay tuned, because we're going to dive deep and continue to keep the faith, and we'll continue to keep you in the prayers for those of you that are continue to go through things. I know we all are going through particular battles and struggles and wavering in our faith, and this type of worshiping of earthly things is not doing none of us any good. We want to keep our eyes on the prize, and that is the Lord Jesus Christ, because he's the one that has finished the race, and he's expecting us to cross the finish line and get there at some point, and so that we can hear him say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." That's what we want to hear. We ain't trying to please man here on earth. We want to please him. Until the next video, my friends, take care. God bless.